Here is something that might completely change the way you think about fibromyalgia. And if you or someone you love is suffering from it right now, I want you to pay very close attention because what I am about to share is not what most doctors are telling their patients. And honestly, that is a massive problem. Fibromyalgia has been dismissed, minimized, and misunderstood for decades. Patients are told it is stress-related, that it is all in their head, that they simply need to relax or see a therapist. But the science tells a completely different story, and it is about time we had an honest conversation about what the research actually shows. Scientists took antibodies isolated directly from fibromyalgia patients and injected them into healthy mice, and what happened next was remarkable. Those previously healthy mice rapidly developed pain hypersensitivity that mirrored human fibromyalgia symptoms almost exactly. That is not a psychosomatic phenomenon. That is measurable, reproducible, biochemical proof that fibromyalgia has a real, physical, immune-based origin, and treating it like a mental health issue or a personality problem is not only wrong, it is genuinely harmful to the people suffering from it. I am Dr. Lucas Whitfield, and I have spent years studying chronic pain, immune dysfunction, and metabolic disease. And today, I want to walk you through exactly what fibromyalgia is, what triggers it, what is happening inside your body when you have it, and most importantly, the specific evidence-backed steps that give people the best possible chance of recovering from it. Let us start at the very beginning. Most people, including many healthcare providers, mistakenly classify fibromyalgia as a pain disorder, something that lives in the nerves and the pain pathways and nowhere else. But that framework misses the most important thing about this condition. Fibromyalgia is, at its core, an immune system disorder. The pain you feel, the fatigue, the cognitive fog, the hypersensitivity, those are downstream effects of something that begins in the immune system and cascades outward into almost every system in the body. Understanding that changes everything about how you approach recovery. So let us talk about what triggers the initial immune disruption, because there are several, and for different people it may be one or a combination of them working together. The first major category of triggers involves latent viral infections. A latent virus is one that has not been fully cleared by your immune system. It has gone into a kind of dormancy inside your tissues, but under the right conditions of stress, immune suppression, or nutritional deficiency, it can re-emerge and begin driving inflammation again. Epstein-Barr virus, the same pathogen responsible for mononucleosis, is one of the most frequently implicated viruses in fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue presentations. Herpes simplex viruses fall into this category as well, and so does the bacterium responsible for Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi, which behaves similarly to a latent infection in the sense that it can persist in tissues and cause ongoing inflammatory disruption even after antibiotic treatment. Certain species of toxic mold produce mycotoxins that can trigger inflammatory cascades in genetically susceptible individuals, leading to a presentation that looks remarkably like fibromyalgia. And then there is the question of adjuvants, particularly aluminum-based adjuvants, which are added to certain vaccines specifically to amplify the immune response. In some individuals, especially those with certain immune genetic profiles, aluminum can cross the blood-brain barrier, accumulate in neural tissue, and contribute to the kind of neuroinflammation that precedes and perpetuates fibromyalgia symptoms. Now, not everyone exposed to these triggers develops fibromyalgia. There is a genetic dimension here. Certain genetic variants can predispose someone to inflammatory and autoimmune responses that make them more vulnerable to these environmental triggers. But, and this is critical, having a genetic predisposition does not mean you are locked into a particular outcome. Your genes are not your destiny. Epigenetics, which is the science of how your environment, diet, sleep, stress levels, and lifestyle choices influence which genes get expressed and which stay dormant, means that you have far more influence over your biology than traditional genetics would suggest. The right interventions can fundamentally shift the expression of even inflammatory genetic profiles, and that is the foundation of hope when it comes to reversing fibromyalgia. Now let us talk about the nutritional vulnerabilities that set the stage for the condition to take hold and persist. The first and most significant one, which Dr. Lucas Whitfield consistently sees in fibromyalgia patients, is vitamin D deficiency. This is not a coincidence, and it is not just about bone health. Vitamin D functions more like a hormone than a vitamin, and it is one of the most powerful regulators of immune activity in the entire body. The natural killer cells, the immune system's frontline soldiers that hunt down virally infected cells and abnormal cells, are critically dependent on adequate vitamin D to function properly. When vitamin D is low, natural killer cell activity crashes, and the immune system loses one of its most important mechanisms for controlling latent viral reactivation. But there is something even more alarming. Many of the pathogens implicated in fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr virus in particular, have actually evolved mechanisms to deliberately downregulate the vitamin D receptor. They do this because they know that a vitamin D replete immune system is far more capable of suppressing them. So they sabotage vitamin D signaling as part of their survival strategy. This creates a vicious cycle where the very infection contributing to fibromyalgia also prevents your body from using the nutrient most capable of fighting it. Low magnesium is the second major nutritional vulnerability, and it is vastly underappreciated in the context of fibromyalgia. The modern food supply is shockingly depleted of magnesium compared to what our ancestors consumed, and the result is that the majority of people, some estimates put it at over 70% of the population, are functionally deficient even when standard blood tests look normal. Why does this matter so much? Because magnesium is required at 3 out of the 9 enzymatic steps in the mitochondrial energy production cascade. It is also required for vitamin D to be properly converted and utilized. It is required for vitamin K2 to function. It is required for thiamine or vitamin B1 to work. And it is a natural blocker of NMDA receptors, specialized receptor sites in the nervous system that, when overstimulated, dramatically amplify pain signals throughout the body. In fibromyalgia patients, those NMDA receptors tend to be hyperactive, which is one of the reasons why pain that would be mild for a healthy person becomes unbearable for someone with fibromyalgia. Magnesium calms that receptor-mediated pain amplification, and it does it naturally without side effects. Low zinc is another common finding in fibromyalgia patients. Zinc is critical for immune regulation, for the proper functioning of hundreds of enzyme systems, and for modulating inflammatory signaling. Without it, the immune system struggles to mount appropriate responses and tends toward chronic, low-grade inflammation rather than the acute, effective immune responses that resolve infections and restore homeostasis. And existing autoimmune conditions dramatically increase susceptibility as well, because the immune dysregulation they produce creates an internal environment where fibromyalgia-type responses can take root far more easily. Now let us get into what is actually happening inside the body once fibromyalgia has taken hold, because understanding the mechanism is what will help you understand why the interventions I am about to recommend are so specifically targeted and effective. The process begins at the level of the small, unmyelinated nerve fibers that are distributed throughout your skin and connective tissue. In fibromyalgia, these tiny nerve fibers become damaged and hypersensitized. The result is that the nervous system begins transmitting pain signals in response to stimuli that would not normally produce pain. A light touch, a change in temperature, the pressure of clothing on the skin. This peripheral nerve sensitization is real. It is measurable under microscopy, and it is one of the reasons why fibromyalgia pain is not imaginary, but is instead a genuine malfunction of pain-sensing hardware. But the nerve damage is only one piece of the puzzle. The more foundational problem happens inside the mitochondria, the tiny double-membraned organelles inside virtually every cell in your body that are responsible for producing the cellular energy currency called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. Under normal healthy conditions, your mitochondria are capable of producing between 36 and 38 molecules of ATP for every glucose molecule that enters the system through a process called oxidative phosphorylation. This is an extraordinarily efficient system, and it is what gives you the energy to move, think, repair, and heal. But in fibromyalgia, Inflammation, particularly the neuroinflammation generated by the immune cascade, blocks the entry point into this oxidative pathway. The door to efficient energy production gets shut, and the body is forced to fall back on an ancient emergency backup system called glycolysis. Glycolysis is profoundly less efficient. Instead of generating 36 to 38 ATP molecules, it generates only 2. And critically, glycolysis produces lactic acid as a byproduct, the same lactic acid that causes the burning sensation in your muscles after intense exercise. In fibromyalgia patients, this lactic acid accumulates chronically, contributing to the muscular pain, heaviness, and achiness that define the condition. With only 2 ATP molecules available rather than 36, the body simply does not have the energy currency required to repair damaged tissue, run immune surveillance, regenerate nerve fibers, or maintain the deep, restorative sleep cycles that would otherwise allow recovery. The system gets stuck in a self-perpetuating state of energy, debt, pain, and inflammation. Sleep is particularly important to address here. The deep, slow-wave sleep stages, specifically what researchers call delta-wave sleep, are the phases during which the body does its most intensive repair work. Growth hormone is released, immune activity ramps up, cellular debris is cleared from the brain, and damaged tissue is reconstructed. In fibromyalgia, the mitochondrial dysfunction and pain signals that persist even during sleep prevent people from reaching and staying in these deep sleep stages. The result is that fibromyalgia patients wake up feeling just as exhausted as when they went to bed, because the reparative work that should have happened during sleep did not happen. This creates yet another self-perpetuating cycle. Pain prevents deep sleep, lack of deep sleep prevents repair, and lack of repair perpetuates pain. So now that we have a clear picture of what is happening, let us talk about what actually works to reverse it. And I want to be very direct here. There is no single pill or supplement that reverses fibromyalgia on its own. What reverses it is a systematic, layered approach that addresses the root causes in the right order. The first and arguably most powerful intervention is therapeutic fasting. This is not about weight loss or caloric restriction. It is about something much more specific. When you fast, your liver begins producing ketone bodies from stored fat. Ketones are an alternative fuel source that can bypass the blocked entry point into the mitochondrial energy pathway, essentially going around the damaged door and feeding the neurons directly through a different route. The impact of this is profound and measurable. A clinical study involving 176 fibromyalgia patients who underwent fasting protocols lasting between 3 and 12 days found statistically significant reductions in pain scores, inflammation markers, and overall fibromyalgia symptom severity, and remarkably, those improvements were maintained 3 months after the fasting period had ended. Fasting also powerfully stimulates the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essentially fertilizer for nervous system tissue. BDNF promotes the regeneration and repair of damaged nerve fibers, which is directly relevant to the peripheral nerve sensitization that fibromyalgia patients experience. And fasting is the most potent known method of reducing deep cellular inflammation, not just the superficial blood marker inflammation, but the inflammation occurring inside the cells themselves where it is hardest to reach with conventional medications. The second major intervention is adopting a low-carbohydrate dietary approach. When you significantly reduce dietary carbohydrates, your body shifts into a state of nutritional ketosis, continuously producing ketone bodies even outside of fasting periods. This keeps the neurons fed, supports mitochondrial health, reduces inflammatory signaling, and for many fibromyalgia patients produces meaningful reductions in pain and fatigue over weeks to months. The key is consistency. The metabolic shift takes time, and the benefits accumulate gradually rather than appearing overnight. The third point I want to emphasize is one that runs counter to common advice for many health conditions. Do not push yourself with intense exercise when you are in the acute phase of fibromyalgia. This is not laziness. This is biology. With mitochondrial output reduced to 2 ATP molecules per glucose cycle, the energy available to the cells is already barely sufficient to sustain basic function. Adding the metabolic demands of intense exercise does not build resilience in this context. It depletes the already critically low energy reserves, triggers additional lactic acid accumulation, and often results in the post-exertional malaise that fibromyalgia patients know all too well, where a period of overexertion is followed by days or weeks of worsened symptoms. Gentle, restorative movement, walking, light stretching, yoga, tai chi is appropriate and beneficial. Intense training should be reintroduced only very gradually as energy production and pain levels improve. Now let us talk about the specific nutritional supplementation that Dr. Lucas Whitfield finds most clinically meaningful for fibromyalgia recovery, starting with vitamin D3. The doses required to genuinely shift immune function in fibromyalgia are substantially higher than the typical maintenance recommendations most people are familiar with. To move blood levels from deficient into the therapeutically optimal range, somewhere between 60 and 80 nanograms per milliliter, many patients need doses in the range of 50,000 international units daily for a period of weeks, under appropriate monitoring. Before you dismiss that as dangerously high, understand that vitamin D toxicity is almost exclusively a function of calcium buildup in the blood, not of vitamin D itself, and that calcium buildup is almost entirely preventable when vitamin D is taken alongside its essential cofactors. Vitamin K2, which directs calcium away from soft tissues and into bones and teeth. Magnesium, which is required for vitamin D activation and also prevents abnormal calcium deposition. And zinc, which supports the entire immune regulatory pathway that vitamin D feeds into. These cofactors are not optional additions. They are requirements for vitamin D to work safely and effectively. Magnesium malate deserves special attention as a form of magnesium that is particularly well matched to fibromyalgia. Unlike other forms of magnesium, magnesium malate combines the mineral with malic acid, a compound that participates directly in the energy production cycle inside the mitochondria, providing a substrate that the cellular energy machinery can use even when it is operating in its compromised glycolytic mode. The magnesium component helps calm hyperactive NMDA receptors, reducing the amplification of pain signals. It relaxes smooth muscle, reducing the muscle spasms and tension that fibromyalgia patients commonly experience. And it supports the deep sleep architecture that is so critical for repair. Clinical studies have specifically examined malate supplementation in fibromyalgia contexts and found it helpful. The therapeutic dosing range is broader than standard magnesium recommendations. Fibromyalgia patients often need between 600 and 2,400 milligrams of magnesium malate daily, distributed across multiple doses rather than taken all at once, to flood the body with enough magnesium to meaningfully shift energy production, reduce pain, and improve sleep. This is not dangerous. The body excretes excess magnesium efficiently through the kidneys, but it should be titrated up gradually. Coenzyme Q10 is another meaningful addition to the fibromyalgia recovery protocol. CoQ10 is a critical component of the mitochondrial electron transport chain, the actual machinery that generates ATP from oxygen and glucose. In fibromyalgia, the mitochondrial pathway is disrupted, and CoQ10 levels are often depleted. Supplementing it helps support the electron transport chain and nudge the mitochondria back toward more efficient energy production. Clinical research has shown improvements in fibromyalgia symptom scores in patients supplementing CoQ10. Vitamin B1, thiamine, is another essential nutrient in this context, particularly for anyone who has a history of significant carbohydrate consumption or alcohol use. Thiamine is a critical cofactor in several of the key enzymatic reactions that bridge the glycolytic pathway to the mitochondrial energy production system. When thiamine is deficient, lactic acid accumulates more rapidly, and the body's ability to make the transition from glycolysis back to efficient oxidative phosphorylation is impaired. Supplementing thiamine, particularly in forms like benfotiamine that cross cell membranes more effectively than standard thiamine, can meaningfully accelerate recovery. Palmitoylethanolamide, commonly referred to as PEA, is a naturally occurring fatty acid compound that the body produces in response to inflammation and injury. It modulates the activity of mast cells and glial cells in the nervous system, two cell types that play central roles in neuroinflammation, and has been clinically studied specifically for fibromyalgia and neuropathic pain. Research shows that PEA can meaningfully reduce neuroinflammation, calm the hypersensitive nervous system, and improve sleep quality in fibromyalgia patients. It is one of the most underutilized tools in the fibromyalgia recovery toolkit. The gut microbiome is another dimension that cannot be overlooked. The gut-brain axis is bidirectional. The state of your gut directly influences immune function, inflammation, neurotransmitter production, and pain perception. Dysbiosis, an imbalance in the gut microbial community, is extremely common in people with fibromyalgia and chronic inflammatory conditions. Rebuilding a healthy gut ecosystem through regular consumption of fermented foods, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, unsweetened yogurt, and similar lacto-fermented products, provides a steady input of live probiotic organisms that help restore microbial balance, reduce intestinal permeability, lower systemic inflammation, and even modulate pain signaling through the gut-brain axis. For individuals who have reason to believe they have accumulated significant amounts of aluminum, whether from vaccine adjuvants, cookware, antiperspirants, or other sources, there is an evidence-backed detoxification approach that does not involve any supplemental capsule or pharmaceutical: silica-rich mineral water. Research has shown that consuming silica-rich water over a period of several months promotes the mobilization and urinary excretion of aluminum from body tissues, including the brain. The silicon in the water forms a soluble complex with aluminum that the kidneys can filter and excrete, gently and safely reducing the total aluminum burden in the body. This is not a fast fix. It requires several months of consistent daily consumption, but it is genuinely useful and well supported by the research. Sunlight exposure deserves dedicated emphasis beyond its role in vitamin D synthesis. Natural sunlight delivers infrared radiation, which penetrates the skin and underlying tissues and has been shown to support mitochondrial function directly. Near-infrared light actually has the capacity to stimulate cytochrome C oxidase, a critical enzyme in the mitochondrial electron transport chain, helping to boost energy production at the cellular level. Sunlight also triggers serotonin synthesis in the skin and brain, which is important because serotonin is not just a mood neurotransmitter, it is also a precursor to melatonin, which regulates circadian rhythms and sleep architecture, which is critical for fibromyalgia recovery. The key is regular, moderate exposure without burning, ideally in the morning or late afternoon when ultraviolet intensity is lower, building up exposure gradually if you have been avoiding sun for a long period. Finally, stress reduction is not a soft, optional lifestyle suggestion. It is a biological necessity in fibromyalgia recovery. The stress hormone cortisol, when chronically elevated, directly suppresses immune function, disrupts gut integrity, depletes magnesium, interferes with vitamin D receptor activity, and worsens sleep quality. Every mechanism by which cortisol harms the body is a mechanism that perpetuates fibromyalgia. Reducing stress, whether through environmental changes, social support, mindfulness practices, time in nature, creative activities, or simply organizing your life to minimize unnecessary demands, is a genuine therapeutic intervention with measurable biological consequences. Do not underestimate it. Fibromyalgia is not a life sentence. It is a complex, multi-layered immune and metabolic dysfunction that develops through specific mechanisms, and because it develops through specific mechanisms, those mechanisms can be targeted systematically. Fasting to restore ketone-based neural fuel, low-carbohydrate eating to sustain metabolic flexibility, high-dose vitamin D3 with its cofactors to rebuild immune regulation, magnesium malate to restore energy production, reduce pain amplification, and improve sleep, coenzyme Q10 and B vitamins to support the mitochondrial machinery, PEA to calm neuroinflammation, fermented foods to heal the gut, silica water if aluminum burden is relevant, sunlight for mitochondrial support and serotonin, and stress reduction as a biological necessity. These are not random suggestions. They are a coherent, mechanistically grounded protocol aimed at the root causes of the condition. Take the time to implement each of these changes deliberately and consistently, and give your body the space and the resources it needs to heal.